defence spending is now creeping up to 2.25% of GDP. Ben Wallace's predecessor suggested it should be 3%. We hear that we've got the smallest army, I think, since the Napoleonic Wars. Numbers are down. There's a question as to whether we can staff frigates in the Red Sea. Why haven't we sent aircraft carriers? What's your impression of the situation?
Well, I don't think it matters how much you spend, it's how effectively you spend it. And we spend it very ineffectively. We have lots of scandals about defence spending. And I think partly because of the monopoly position of some of our defence suppliers, we don't get good value and we don't get reliability. This latest story in the Telegraph is that HMS Diamond, which is our ship, which is out there defending the Red Sea, doesn't have the capability of firing a missile from the ship to the land, so it can't participate in the attacks on the Houthis. So in order that we can participate in the attacks, we're flying RAF aircraft from Cyprus, which is a very long way away. When I was Defence Secretary, I ordered cruise missiles for our nuclear-powered, but not nuclear-armed submarines. And I think we have 6 or possibly 7 of those. But last autumn, it was reported that 5 of those were out of commission, were not available. We have about 21 aggressive surface ships. So we've got 2 aircraft carriers, then we've got frigates, and we've got destroyers. But at any one time, you can count on about half of those not being available because they're under refit or whatever. So we have a minimal surface fleet now. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem that we're able to deploy a submarine to the area that can fire cruise missiles. Our 2 aircraft carriers, built at enormous expense, are sitting in Portsmouth.
Which seems to most people ludicrous, at least with what's going on.
It doesn't seem ludicrous to me.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
All right, still to come, Kelvin Mackenzie on the shocking calibre of Labour MPs being elected. But first, it's time for Reform UK leader Richard Tice. Now, it's emerged that 1 in every 4 foreign care workers, up to 25,000, by the way, are working illegally in the UK. That's according to the Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration. Unbelievably, the Home Office has issued 275 visas to a care home that did not exist, and 1,234 to a company that claimed it only had 4 staff when granted its licence to operate. This follows reports that more than 700 foreign nurses in Britain are treating patients despite being under investigation for not actually being qualified. The alleged fraudsters used proxies to take the necessary registration tests in Nigeria. So, Richard, with the social care and nursing sectors being played, does Britain's broken immigration system actually need a complete overhaul? I mean, are people dying as a result of this now?
Who knows, Patrick? But what we do know is that this is just yet more utter, woeful incompetence from the Home Office, from various authorities, and indeed the NHS with regard to nurses that are not qualified, it turns out. Wherever you look, there is just so much incompetence, you actually have to describe it as gross negligence. It's appalling, and we're all, not only are we suffering, we're paying the bills for this, and all our quality of life is deteriorating, and yet no one in the establishment or in Parliament seems to care at all about this stuff. And as for a fake care home, how could anybody be so useless not to just check, maybe, does the care home exist? I mean, how does this happen? It's just mind-boggling. People at home will be just, frankly, throwing something at the television.
Yeah, I mean, the care home sector is one thing. The fact that we also have potentially 700 nurses who've never done a nursing qualification working in the NHS, they could be treating you now.
But they're completely unrelated. The only common factor is utter incompetence and negligence. That's the point. And it's us that's paying the bill. And it's infuriating.
I'll read what the Home Office have said about this. So they've now announced new restrictions, they say, on social care visas, and a spokesperson has said this. Care workers make a vital contribution to society, but immigration is not the long-term answer to our social care needs. That is why measures due to be laid in Parliament will cut the rising numbers of visas granted to overseas care workers and address significant concerns about high levels of non-compliance, worker exploitation and the abuse within the sector of overseas workers. But it's difficult there, Rich, isn't it? Because it's easy for you to sit there and say, well, look, this is complete and utter incompetence. I suppose at the moment, if we didn't have these people, then we wouldn't have enough staff.
It's not difficult at all. It's actually blindingly simple. It worked in the 80s, it worked in the 90s, using British people, British workers...
What if they don't want to do it, Richard?
No, it's about pay, because what's happened is, if you import cheap, low-skilled or unqualified overseas labour, you depress British wages, so big business makes off handsomely, and it's the decent British worker that gets utterly shafted.
All right, well, here's another absolute shocker for you. So a new report has found that economically inactive legal migrants and foreign students have cost the taxpayer £36 billion since 2020, in figures that cast doubt over claims that mass migration is actually crucial to boosting Britain's ailing economy. And if you take students out of that, it is around £24 billion since 2020 for economically inactive legal migrants. I mean, Richard, surely now, after everything, after talk about pressures on housing, pressures on our infrastructure, surely now the economic argument's gone as well, hasn't it?
But again, we've been lied to for decade after decade by the establishment, by the Labour Party, by the Conservative Party. They always said that immigration is good for our economy. No, it's not. These figures prove it. If you have cheap, low-skilled immigration for people who are depressing British wages or not working at all, then actually it's a huge burden on us, on our public services. We all pay the price. Public services get worse, housing rents go up, and the quality of life in our beloved country deteriorates. And it's got to stop.
What about GDP, though, Richard? You can't put a price on cultural enrichment.
Hey, but what happened to GDP last year, Patrick? It went down. The Prime Minister says the economy is recovering. He's got a plan. No, it's not. We're in recession. And when you take an account of GDP per head, we've actually been going down for 7 quarters in a row, the worst since record began in the mid-50s. It destroys the whole of this mass immigration nightmare.
But what do we do practically here? So if we've got 20... Let's take the foreign students out of it, all right? Look, that's, you know, that is what that is. But if you've got the £24 billion since 2020 going to economically inactive people, so that we've legally let in it, what do we do with them now? I mean, some of those could have been here for years. I mean, what? We can't just deport them all, can we?
No, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is actually people have got to become economically active. People who are not working, who can work, shouldn't be able to claim benefits. The people who come to live in the UK, there's a fee for using our services. It's not a freebie. The reason so many people are coming here is because we stupidly make it a freebie.
OK, now, look, there's one more for you, which we've just about got time for. Sue Gray has revealed the Labour Party's plans to introduce citizens' assemblies to the UK, in which members of the public are asked to decide on issues such as assisted dying, devolution and where new houses should be built. She was interviewed for a new biography of Keir Starmer. So his chief of staff has said this: "This is one way that we can help resolve these questions by involving communities at an early stage. Whitehall will not like this because they have no control." Citizens' assemblies have largely been deemed successful in countries such as Ireland, apparently. They're typically made up of 99 randomly selected members of the public and one appointed moderator, and their conclusions result in recommendations to Parliament or even referendums. Richard, I'm keen to get your view on this. You know, I think, you know, broadly in favour of PR. You liked a referendum in your time.
Yeah, I do. I like referendum, and actually, you know, I like pushing power down as close as possible to the people and listening to the people. So I think sensibly used, it's absolutely fine. And you can listen to people as long as it's not an excuse for kicking the can down the road because you haven't got any guts, any conviction, any principle, any views of your own. That's the difference. We can't be swamped with sort of ever-long, very expensive process for process's
sake. So conceivably, what's interesting here is that we now have everyone's crying out for Labour policy. We appear to have Sue
Really?
Graves.
Who's crying out for Labour policy?
To find out what it is.
Oh, I see.
That's what I mean. But then we've got Sue Graves, the Chief of Staff, who now appears to be announcing what policy is, which Keir Starmer can suitably distance himself from if he doesn't like it. And then also now we can say, well, if he's in power, he can hide behind a People's Assembly, presumably, and say, well, we're going to have to... I wouldn't want to preempt the verdict from this 99 group of randomly selected people, so we'll have to wait and see what that is. Is that something that you would be concerned about there?
Well, I think it just proves that he's got no guts and conviction of his own. He's just Captain Flip-Flop, Captain Hindsight. It's absurd. We need real leadership, real conviction.
Look, I suppose, maybe we are looking at this in the worst-case scenario, which is fair enough in a sense, but, perhaps this will work. Well, I mean, I'm broadly in favour of the idea of more people being directly involved in decision-making if it takes civil servants in Whitehall out of it and people act on it. And I do actually think the Labour Party might want to be a little bit careful what they wish for, because I think if they did get the real views of real people when it comes to things like Rwanda, for example, then they might end up enacting policies
or migration. They might be rather surprised.
But we'll have to wait and see. Richard, thank you very much. Richard Tice there, who is, of course, the leader of Reform UK. Now, coming up, Keir Starmer edging closer to calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Have political extremists now got the Labour leader running scared? Find out more at 10. But next, with up to 150 Tory MPs potentially resigning before the next election, should he just call a general election now, Rishi Sunak, and put an end to all of this nonsense? And are Labour's new MPs really up to the job? I've got Calvin Mackenzie. He's live in the studio. You don't want to miss that. I'll see you in a tick.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years, 70
1951,
years,
whatever
right.
it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
All right, it's Patrick Christys tonight, and we are only on GB News. Still to come, is Keir Starmer about to get back into bed with far-left Corbynites? It certainly looks that way, but first it's time for Fleet Street kingpin Kelvin MacKenzie. Now, senior Tory sources have admitted that more than 100 Tory MPs could resign before the next election. Some people are predicting that it could be as many as 150, jumping ship in a record-breaking desertion of the party, and I would also extend to that country. Now, this includes 58 Conservative MPs who, believe it or not, have already announced that they will not stand at the next election. So 58 have already said they're not running. Last week's crushing defeats in local by-elections put the country on a course for a Labour government at the ballot box. One of those planning to quit reportedly told his friends, "I'm not going because I think I'm going to lose. I'm going because I'm worried I might win," as they feared the prospect of being left in a party of, quote, nutters. Kelvin, with Tory MPs potentially jumping ship, should Sunak call an election and put us out of our misery or not?
If I'm Sunak, I'm hanging on to right to the end. I don't need the money, but I seriously believe I've got more chance in November than I have in May. But the main point, the reason these guys are all going, is they're all rushing to get jobs, because who on earth is going to hire a failed Conservative politician? The reason that the country is rejecting them is because of the atrocious manner in which they run our nation now for the best part of a decade. It's a real shocker. And you're going to invite some useless creep like that on your board, or put them in charge of your museum, or do something? Why would you do that? And what they're all scared about, and the reason they're going now, is because there may only be 2 jobs for them, and they want to get there nice and quickly because they're scared that come November there might be 300 of them.
I mean, we've seen useless Tories do well for themselves before. Rory Stewart's on the rise.
Roy, you're quite right, but at least he's just talking rubbish alongside somebody else who talks rubbish.
Let's talk of him becoming some head honcho. I think it's one of Oxford University's colleges or something. I mean, talk about falling upwards.
Yes, it is true. It is true. And, of course, the same could be said of George Osborne, who's absolutely hopeless.
Is that 7 jobs, George?
Yeah, 27 jobs, George, as he's now known, who's now doing his best to sell the Daily Telegraph to the Arabs. He now represents Redbird, and so we know where he's fair. He's there to make money, and good luck to him. But nobody in their right mind is going to hire any MP, especially somebody who's been a Conservative.
Let's just have a look at the actual cowardice of this, though. OK. Is it right that these MPs, potentially as many as 150 of them, should just jump ship before the next election? Do they not have a moral duty to at least stand? They're handing over a defeat to somebody else, potentially. They're weakening the party, with it as well the country. It's remarkable.
Yeah. Well, actually, one of them comes in here fairly regularly, doesn't he? Kwasi Kwarteng. He said he's told the people of Spelthorne that he's off ski, right? And so these are a shocking V-sign to their people. When everything's going well, oh, yes, I'm going to be Chancellor, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that. Hello, what's going on? Oh, you don't like me? Well, in that case, I'm off. No, it is completely wrong. They should not be allowed to say goodbye. They should sit there and fight for it.
Yeah, I mean, the country needs to be fought for at the moment. We have problems left, right and centre, and they appear to be deciding to leave. But talking of MPs, the calibre of the Labour MPs who won last week's by-elections has been called into question. So Wellingborough's new 28-year-old MP, Jen Kitchen, has limited experience. It's mostly in charity work. Here's some of her victory speech.
I am honoured that local people have placed their trust in me and the Labour Party under Keir Starmer. But I also know from the thousands of conversations I have had during this campaign how desperately people...
Yeah. Nigel Farage wasn't impressed.
I don't want to be rude, but, good luck to Jen Kitchen. She's now the Labour MP. I mean, that wasn't a speech. That was reading off a sheet of paper. And it kind of sums up, I think...
Do candidates like this cut the mustard, Kelvin?
No, she is hopeless, right? So she comes out of Queen Mary University at Twickenham, which, honestly, be very lucky to be a technical college, right? And then, what does she do for the next 7 years? She goes into the charity business, right? And during that, the last bit, she is in charge of philanthropy in the charity business. So not only is it not her money, she's giving away, as part of her career, giving away money. Now, that will make her a fantastic Labour MP. Giving away other people's money.
At least she's had the bottle, Kelvin, to stand for election and win. You know?
Yeah.
It's not her fault she's won, is it? And you know, we've just done a piece there, 150 Tory MPs quitting. At least there's someone who wants to be in Parliament.
She does want to be in Parliament. And when finally the good people of Wellingborough wake up to what they've got, they will throw her back out again. By-elections are very, very harsh places the second time you stand. So all I'm saying is that the best that Labour could do? And is that what's happening to politics? Are we actually... can you only get into this game if you've been into the charity business?
Well, so let's say 150 Tory MPs quit. We've got no idea who's going to stand as a Tory MP in those 150 seats. They're obviously, by definition, going to be the second best choice, I would say, at least. And then, you know, if who's Labour standing against them as well. Anyway, look, Kelvin, thank you very, very much. As I've said before, I think the big loser here is all the British public, aren't we? But Kelvin Mackenzie there. Now, coming up, this is a big story. Why are Eritrean migrants clashing on the streets all over Europe and in the UK? And how worried should we be? Former BBC Africa editor Martin Plaut explains why we should indeed be very, very concerned. But next, as Keir Starmer moves closer to calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza after weeks of pressure, I'm asking, is he on the run from extremists and is he about to get into bed with Jeremy Corbyn? Plus, disgraceful hospital meals that you wouldn't even feed your dog.
Warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good evening to you. I'm Alex Burkill. Here's your latest GB News weather update. There will be a spell of wet and windy weather for many of us tomorrow, but before that, we do have a relatively quiet night ahead. That's because we have high pressure to the south of us, which is keeping our weather largely settled. That being said, a weak front is pushing its way eastwards across Scotland this evening, bringing some thick cloud and some outbreaks of rain for a time. Then through much of the night, for many of us, it is going to be largely dry. Perhaps some thickening cloud in the west will bring a few outbreaks of drizzly rain here, and watch out for some mist and fog patches too. It may be a touch fresher than some recent nights, particularly in the east where we may get some clearer skies, temperatures perhaps dropping to low single figures but staying above freezing. However, as we go through Tuesday, a wet morning across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland as a band of rain pushes its way in. That is then going to slip further south and eastwards into England and Wales as we head into the afternoon, though across the southeast here it's likely to stay dry at least during the daytime, and mild again, highs of around 14 or 15 Celsius. Some showers pushing in behind that front later on Tuesday, but it's on Wednesday where we get the heaviest rain, likely to be pretty persistent and could cause some localised problems, especially in the southwest, where we do have a warning as some travel disruption and some localised flooding is quite likely. That rain does clear through as we go into Thursday, but more unsettled weather to come as we go through the end of the week and into the weekend, with temperatures dropping close to normal for the time of year.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Welcome to the show. Superb stuff, great footage. So you're right in the thick of it there. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, I've left there now. I've actually now come to that EU Council summit that I was talking about. It's still pretty chaotic. The entire city of Brussels has been completely clogged with these tractors, sort of three abreast in most of the roads across the city. The people of Brussels aren't particularly happy. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent for some people of the Just Stop Oil protests, you know, people gluing themselves. People are unable to get to hospital appointments, and there's a lot of upset about the destruction that's happening on the streets of Brussels today. But on the other side, there's also the protests, which the farmers are saying that EU green laws simply are not able to fit with what they need to do to keep their businesses going. And just before the protests happened, we saw the European Commission actually make some concessions to the farmers' protests. And this is on the demands that were put on them to set aside somewhere in the region of 5% of their land for regrowing for biodiversity. A lot of the farmers have said that's not possible, and the European Commission has said that they can delay that coming in. So they have won a small concession with these protests.
And Jack, there's a feeling as well, a huge dissatisfaction that the European Union has managed to find 50 billion euros in aid to send to Ukraine, and yet farmers in particular are on the receiving end of net zero targets, taxation on diesel and endless red tape. So many farmers, Jack, saying they're measuring ditches to see if they have to drain them or not. There are minimum requirements on the width of battery hen enclosures. Endless red tape, as Jeremy Clarkson pointed out in Clarkson's farm in Britain. They've simply had enough, and they're shouting, Ursula von der Leyen, we are here.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight. Extremists have Keir Starmer on the run, and he's about to get back into bed with Jeremy Corbyn. And Eritreans are getting violent right across Europe, and I will reveal why that is a problem for us here in Britain. Plus, hospital dinners you wouldn't even feed your dog. Also,
yeah, he's on his phone, he's all right.
Health and safety gone mad. What's the point of our emergency services there? I've got all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages for you tonight, with Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, journalist Mike Buckley and ex-Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucio. And they've got a religious habit of winning, this lot. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Sir Keir Starmer is about to cave into extremists. I'll explain how next.
The top story tonight from the GB Newsroom, a man who piloted a people smuggling boat across the English Channel has been found guilty of manslaughter. Here's the rescue taking place in December 2022. If you're watching on TV, you can see the dinghy has collapsed in on itself. That ended up killing 4 people who were on board. And Ibrahima Bar, who's a Senegalese migrant, was in charge of that vessel, navigating using only mobile phone technology, which the judge said led directly to the deaths. One of the passengers told Kent Police it was common knowledge among those on the boat that once they entered British waters, they would be rescued. The business secretary took aim at the former Post Office chairman today, accusing him of making up claims that he was told to delay compensation payments. Yesterday, Mr Staunton suggested he'd been made a scapegoat for the Post Office scandal and that the government had deliberately delayed compensation payouts. Hundreds of Post Office staff are still waiting for compensation, despite the government announcing that those who've had convictions quashed are eligible. Speaking in the Commons, Kemi Badenoch said Mr Staunton's claims were a blatant attempt to seek revenge following dismissal himself.
Mr Staunton claimed that when he was first appointed as chair of the Post Office, he was told by a senior civil servant to stall on paying compensation. There is no evidence whatsoever that this is true. In fact, on becoming Post Office chair, Mr Staunton received a letter from the Bay's Permanent Secretary, Sarah Mumby, on the 9th of December 2022. It welcomed him to his role, making it crystal clear that successfully reaching settlements with victims of the Post Office scandal should be one of his highest priorities.
Kemi Badenoch. Now, new government guidance been issued today for teachers in England on restricting the use of smartphones in schools as concerns grow over the impact of social media on young people. Head teachers can now choose to include a ban on phones with provisions for searches of school bags if necessary. Head teachers say the guidelines aren't needed because robust rules already exist. The government says, though, that recent data showed 29% of secondary school pupils reported mobile phones being used during class. The Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, says the government's ensuring clarity and consistency exists across all schools.
What we're trying to do is change the social norm, change the norm in our schools that phones are not acceptable in our schools. But some other countries have already done this. Quite a few countries have already done this. And we just want to make sure that it's consistent and we make it clear and we empower head teachers to do this. And we think that mostly this is something that parents would welcome.
Now, Lord Cameron has been visiting some key battle sites in the Falkland Islands in the South Atlantic today as part of his visit to show islanders there that they are a valued part of the British family. At Goose Green, where 18 British Army personnel died in 1982, Lord Cameron visited the museum and thanked locals for keeping their memory alive. He also laid a wreath at San Carlos, nicknamed Bomb Alley, due to the aerial attacks faced by British warships in 1982 as they protected the land against invading Argentinians. It's the first visit by a Foreign Secretary there for almost 30 years and comes amid renewed Argentine calls for negotiations on the island's future. For the latest stories, do sign up for GB News alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Extremists and radicals have got Sir Keir Starmer on the run and he's about to get back into bed with Jeremy Corbyn. Starmer whipped his MPs to vote against a ceasefire a few months ago and a third rebelled. He lost 8 shadow cabinet ministers. Now, Labour MPs are getting hounded everywhere they go, like Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves getting a verbal battering in the street again.
Why did you not vote for a ceasefire? Rachel, where are you going? Rachel, Israel's got a right to defend, but Palestine hasn't, Rachel. Why, Rachel? Why are Palestinians lesser people? Where are you going, Rachel?
Mr Starmer is having to deal with a raft of alternative campaign posters popping up as well. I stand with genocide, Tel Aviv. Keith is the latest that I've seen there. It's happening on a daily basis now. Labour made a big thing about appealing to the Muslim vote. Now, they've lost the Muslim vote and they've realised that they've made a mistake. In fact, they have literally lost the Muslim vote. The website has popped up, muslimvote.co.uk. They say they're backing candidates in every single constituency where the MP abstained or voted against a ceasefire. The pressure now is massive. And now, Keir Starmer has been backed into a corner by the SNP.
Week, SNP MPs will be bringing forward a motion to the House of Commons to back an immediate ceasefire. History will judge all of us by our words and by our actions.
So will Starmer tell Labour MPs to vote for the SNP motion? Well, Labour in Scotland have gone for it. Scotland's Labour leader Anil Sarwar has come out in favour, so he's broken ranks. Now, I asked Jonathan Reynolds, who is Labour's Shadow Secretary of State for Business and Trade, if he would vote for the SNP ceasefire motion.
The position the Labour Party has is that we want the fighting to stop, we want a cessation of violence, we want a serious, sustainable ceasefire. That means both sides, and we want a peace process out of that. And I think that is right. I think people saying that you ignore the fact that hostages are still being held or that you somehow only think there's one side in this. We want both sides to be part of that ceasefire, and we want a proper, sustainable two-state peace process.
Didn't answer the question. And Wes Streeting, who is one of the MPs who could lose his seat to a pro-Palestinian independent, well, he couldn't give a straight answer either.
See what their final wording...
Well, we have that. We have the final wording. It's been confirmed by the SNP.
I'm not sure it's been tabled, but...
Well, this House calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Will you back that?
We will put our own position out. And we...
So will there be a Labour motion?
Where we want to get to... Well, I'm not going to preempt decisions that are being taken by colleagues.
Well, it's only 2 days away
what you
now.
might be doing. Well, then you won't mind waiting, will you?
They haven't got an answer. They haven't got an answer. And then Starmer comes out and says this.
End to the fighting, not just now, not just for a pause, but permanently. A ceasefire that lasts, conference, that is what must happen now. The fighting must stop now.
Well, that's not going to wash, is it? Will he vote for a ceasefire on Wednesday or not? And the latest development is that hard-left Jeremy Corbyn backing group Momentum have said they're going to start a lobbying blitz, encouraging people to call on Labour MPs to back the SNP's amendment, demanding an immediate ceasefire. So, if Keir Starmer caves into the old ceasefire cause, who's he on the same side as?
I want MPs just to wake up and think about what is happening in Gaza. Think what the International Court of Justice said, and think that there are now demonstrations today in 45 countries around the world. This is a global movement for Palestine. Is Britain going to be left behind in that global movement?
He'd also be caving into pressure from people like this woman, spotted on the so-called peaceful pro-Palestine protest at the weekend. Long live the Intifada. Intifada, of course, being a kind of violent insurrection there. And, of course, these people as well, who hounded a man stating the simple fact that Hamas are a terrorist group. Keir Starmer is facing his worst nightmare when the SNP hold a vote on a ceasefire. Labour are getting battered on social media. Labour MPs are getting hounded out of town wherever they go. He has lost the Muslim vote, and that is not coming back, no matter what he does. Why? Because everyone knows where he really stands on this issue. He's been relatively pro-Israel, and that's all it takes. So if he caves in now, it's because he's been outfoxed politically, he's caving into a minority of political extremists, and he's trying to appease Jeremy Corbyn. It's worth noting then, isn't it, that this guy might soon have the keys to Downing Street. But let's get the thoughts of my panel. I have got Daily Express columnist Carol Malone. It's also journalist and commentator Mike Buckley and the former Brexit Party MEP Belinda DeLucy. Carol, is Sir Keir Starmer caving into extremists and he's about to get back into bed with Corbyn?
Yeah, of course it is. This is typical of slippery Starmer. It's political expediency above principle. It was only 4 months ago he said that a ceasefire was totally the wrong thing to do. He said it would embolden Hamas. It would stop Israel dismantling Hamas. He said it was completely the wrong move, and he said he would never cave into demands from people who were saying he had to change his mind. What has he done 4 months later? Because he knows the election's coming, because he knows the election in Rochdale is coming, he's caved in. Because he knows the Muslim vote, the Labour depends on the Muslim vote, and Corbyn is whipping up Muslims. There was an interesting, a Muslim youth organisation, the boss of that, a guy called Mohammed Shafiq, said today that Rochdale the by-election was a referendum on Gaza. It shouldn't be that. It should be for the needs of the people of Rochdale. And you know what's farcical to me? That, you know, that Starmer's leadership and possibly the election results depends on a war that's being fought in a different country and has nothing to do with us. Why does Corbyn think stopping the war is our job, and that someone like Netanyahu is going to listen to what Keir Starmer says and say, OK, Keir, we'll stop this now.
All right. Keir Starmer's let this rumble on for quite a while, obviously.
I mean, just to come back to what you said, if Keir Starmer hadn't changed his views in 4 months, I would be worried, to be honest with you. That would be really odd in the context of
Why would it be odd?
Let's just think about the context we're in. 28,000 people have died now in Gaza, the majority of the women and children. I think it would be very odd.
Do we know that for a fact, or are we?
Yes, we do.
Are we believing Hamas?
It's the agreed figure, and there are lots of international observers there. I think there'd be something quite wrong with you if you didn't want that to stop. I mean, why would you want the fighting to continue, and why would you want women and children and men, particularly, to keep dying? Why on earth would any living human being want that? I cannot imagine. And you talk about Keir Starmer being in bed with extremists. You haven't actually pointed to any extremists he's in bed with or giving into, if I'm quite honest.
He's talking
if we really want to play that game, he obviously did offer legal advice to Hizb ut-Tahrir, which are now, of course...
He was doing his job of Director of Public Prosecutions. He was a lawyer. I mean, of course he has to do his job, you know. But you haven't actually pointed to any extremists you're getting into with now. But if you look at people calling... If you just let me finish. If you look at people calling for a ceasefire, the US government today has just submitted a resolution to the UN saying we now want the fighting to stop. The French government, the German government, the Spanish government, Rishi Sunak himself...
So how does he vote on Wednesday?
Rishi Sunak himself...
Does he, on Wednesday, it comes around, he's got a straight choice between granting victory to the SNP, right, by voting for their ceasefire amendment, or... Losing more than a third of its MPs?
Who cares about the SNP motion? The SNP are simply troublemaking, and they're trying to put Labour in a difficult spot. I mean, that is obvious.
He's been outfoxed by the
SNP are just playing politics with this. But Keir Starmer's position is very, very clear. He gave a speech the other day. Yes, he did. He gave the other day saying he wants the violence to end now. He doesn't need to vote for an SNP resolution in Parliament to say that.
And 4 months ago, he said he didn't...
Who cares what he said 4 months ago? The situation's changed irrevocably in the last 4 months.
You mentioned the
4 months ago, 28,000 people hadn't died.
Stop shouting.
I'm not shouting at you.
You are.
I'm just making a very clear point.
I'm trying to talk and you're trying to drown out my point. And my point
why
is,
don't you go ahead?
What has he said about the 1,200 people that were slaughtered in Israel? Has he said much about them? You're talking about the people who've been killed.
He's talked about that
What started this was the attack on
he's
Israel.
made clear that
Let me get Belinda's view, and then I will come back to both of you. Belinda, I mean, from where I can see, if Keir Starmer caves in now and decides to vote for a ceasefire, is it not giving in to mob rule on the streets, do you think?
Yeah, he reminds me of that Churchill quote, an appeaser is one who feeds the crocodile in the hope it eats him last. And there is a lot of truth to this, and the Tory party are also responsible for appeasement and buckling down to Islamist mobs, and the hard left give Islamist mobs sanctuary. I've been the victim of Islamist bullying on quite a few occasions. I had to have the police involved one time. It is frightening, being harassed, being followed, being cornered by very raging males. And I've seen what's been happening to MPs, whether it's by the hard left or Islamist mobs. And I wonder whether Keir is frightened, if he doesn't come out with this stance, what's going to happen to his candidates at the next election as they go door knocking? Are they going to be faced with the threat of violence and intimidation? And maybe it's his way of trying to keep them safe, but what a way of buckling. We shouldn't be submitting to this. We should be defending and standing up.
This is political expediency, isn't it? Because he knows what the elections come out. He knows there are pro-Palestinian candidates being put in seat to challenge Labour. So this is to save his job and to save his party.
I mean, there's no point in the genie back in the bottle there. People have made their minds about that, although I can understand to some ways too. Mike, can I just ask you, so he's said he wants an end to the fighting, this war must stop now. He's spoken a bit about a ceasefire. He has not made it clear. I mean, neither could Wes Streeting or Jonathan Reynolds. I mean, whether or not they are actually going to vote for a ceasefire on Wednesday. I mean, how do you predict this will play out on Wednesday? What do you think will happen?
I actually don't know. I mean, I think what Wes Streeting said is that they haven't seen the final wording yet from the SNP, so they're waiting to see that, then they would make a decision on how they're going to vote for it. But as I've just said, I think it doesn't matter, because Keir was very clear the other day he wants to see an end to the fighting, as does, by the way, Rishi Sunak.
Yeah, but there was this permanent ceasefire, Mike. There was one.
Yes.
Hamas broke it, and the idea you're going to ask an Islamist terror group to put their weapons down when in their manifesto they want to annihilate Israel. You were never going to get
about a ceasefire.
But you seem to trust Hamas in that.
I don't trust Hamas, but I don't trust the Israeli government either.
Do you actually think Hamas wants a ceasefire?
There's been incredible wrongdoing on both sides.
Do you believe Hamas wants? I don't.
I believe that they do want a ceasefire.
What makes you think Hamas wants a ceasefire?
Everybody wants to see the killing come to an end.
They're literally putting women and children
that there's ever been.
Well, they have one fairly recently. They kept to it.
Really? They kept it. So why did they kill the 1,200 people?
And rape and behead.
Yes, exactly.
I'm going to just do another little straw poll here now. So Wednesday comes around, as we understand it, the SNP have got, and from what I have seen of it, it's pretty clear. An immediate ceasefire is what the SNP are saying that they want. So there's going to be some kind of vote on this on Wednesday, as we understand it. OK. Does Keir Starmer tell his Labour MPs to vote for or against that, do you think?
He won't do it.
What, he'll just abstain?
I think he won't make it the instruction as clear as you're saying.
You think he'll...
He tried it once before. He was ignored by 56 MPs and 8 shadow ministers.
Go on, put a tenner on it. Which way do you think he's going to go?
I don't know what he's going to do. But what I do know is that he is very, very clear that he wants to see an end to the violence, because he said that literally 2 or 3 days ago, and that he wants to see a sustainable, peaceful solution.
Belinda, do you think he'd whip his MPs to vote against this motion, or how do you think it would go?
I agree, I agree with Carol on this, actually. I think, especially after the MP candidate with his conspiracy theory about Israel came out and his delay over that. I think. So
you think we might be in free vote territory for them potentially? Well, we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait. None of us have got a crystal ball, of course, and a couple of days is a long time in politics. Look, thank you very much for that. It's a good start to the hour. Now, in the last week, it is the last week to enter our Great British Giveaway, and it's your last week to grab a chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash. Here's all the details you need to get your entry in.
It's the final week to see how you could be the winner of £18,000 in tax-free cash. That's like having an extra £1,500 each month for the next year. Listen to the moment we told Phil from West Yorkshire he'd won our last Great British Giveaway.
Hello?
Phil, I've got some really good news for you. You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
You're joking. That's brilliant news.
But hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, Text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Good luck.
Coming up, my panel react to the big headlines in tomorrow's newspaper front pages, including a potential return to royal duties for Prince Harry, and next, violent riots among Eritreans across Europe. So, have we imported sectarian violence to the West, and should we be worried about scenes like this happening on the streets of Britain? Former BBC Africa editor Martin Plout will reveal exactly what we're dealing with here. He's live in the studio in just a tick. Trust me, you will want to listen to what this man has to say. It's Patrick Christys tonight, and we are only on GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Elon Musk has announced that the first patients to receive a groundbreaking brain implant from Neuralink is recovering well.
This is all a bit odd. The product, called telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in a region of the brain that controls movement.
Yes, Elon Musk says that the first goal is to enable people to control a phone or a computer just by thinking. He says that initial tests show promising signs of brain activity, meaning that patients with paralysis could one day overcome their conditions.
Not sure about this one. Joining us to discuss this breakthrough is applied futurist Tom Cheesewright. Tom, this sounds, well, slightly terrifying.
I certainly think a lot of people will be thinking this is something out of a sci-fi horror rather than reality. But this is a technology that's been a long time coming. We've been developing direct brain-computer interfaces for a long time, mostly for the sort of therapeutic reasons that are the initial goal, at least, of Elon Musk's Neuralink, to allow people who are perhaps quadriplegic to have direct control via their brains of initially a smartphone and maybe ultimately artificial limbs or a wheelchair.
It does seem fascinating how quickly this technology is moving on. I saw demonstrations perhaps a year or two ago of people playing a very simple Pong game just by thinking, moving sort of one line on a screen up and down. This seems like potentially there has been a breakthrough that means far more complex things can be controlled just by thinking.
Well, there's lots of different aspects to this technology. The initial attempts to interface with the brain used actually quite thick prongs almost that went into the brain, and they were quite solid, and so if the brain moved, they could potentially cause damage.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Patrick Christys tonight. We're on GB News. Tomorrow's newspaper front pages are on the way. But first, I'm absolutely fascinated by this story, OK? So, the Dutch city of The Hague was rocked last night by violent riots between rival Eritrean mobs, torching cars, attacking the police. Now, the violence was between 2 enemy groups who appeared to support and oppose the Eritrean government. Now, it's not the first time that this has happened, OK? At least 26 police officers were injured and over 200 people were arrested when clashes broke out at an Eritrean cultural festival in the German city of Stuttgart. And the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced a plan to remove all migrants from the East African country after dozens of people were left injured when rival groups clashed in Tel Aviv a couple of months ago. And in the UK, 8 people were arrested in December after a confrontation turned violent, again involving, we believe anyway, 2 different Eritrean groups. So given that nearly 3,000 Eritreans have arrived on small boats last year, should we now be worried about importing foreign politics and, frankly, foreign violent issues onto our shores? I'm very gratefully joined now by the former BBC Africa editor and research fellow at King's College University. It is Martin Plows. Martin, how worried should we be here in Britain about Eritrean violence, do you think?
Well, I think we should be worried because these conflicts have been going on now for at least the last 2 to 3 years, and they're growing in intensity. The one in Tel Aviv that you mentioned was really bad and there was even a gunshot by one of the government supporters inside the Eritrean community against their opponents. And there were a lot of people were injured. Frankly, a lot of them by the Israeli police, but a lot of them were injured in the stones that were thrown. And there's real bitterness in the community about the issue and about the strategy.
So why is it that Eritreans are, like, so angry with each other? What's going on there? And in terms of the geography about where they live in Britain, is part of the problem that we've imported both sides of the foreign conflict, as it were?
Well, it's a complicated story because, in a sense, we only bring in refugees, people who are fleeing from the regime. The regime is the most repressive in Africa. I mean, there was an interesting exchange in Parliament today where Patrick Grady, the SNP MP, asked the Minister of State, Andrew Mitchell, what they were going to do because there are such bad human rights in Eritrea that he called it the North Korea of the Horn of Africa. And Andrew Mitchell replies, I think the gentleman pulls his punches. It's worse than he said. That is how bad the situation is in Eritrea. What in a sense has happened is they came to power in 93, independent country after 30 years of fighting for their independence against Ethiopia. They broke with Ethiopia, a separate independent country. But it's become such a repressive dictatorship. They've never had elections. They have no free press. They have no independent judiciary. And the president rules by decree. Everybody is forced to go into national service, which is really just conscription, and they can be in there for up to 20 years.
Wow.
And he sent them into one war after another. You remember the war in Ethiopia that ended about a year ago? Nobody knows how many died, possibly as many as 100,000.
So essentially, everyone from that really could probably claim asylum.
Exactly.
Over here. But the issue with that is that we end up with both sides of that living here, do we?
Well, the problem is that they tend to come over, Eritreans tend to come over here, and they risk everything to come here. They go through the Sahara, many of them die there, others of them die in boats on the Mediterranean. They then cross Europe, and then they think that Britain is going to be a safe haven. They try and get across the channel, and you see the bodies in the water. But when they get here, they then, it takes them a long time to get used to living in Britain. It's not an easy place to live in. They think it's going to be easy, but actually it's quite tough. But then they are faced with pressure from the government. If you wanted to get, for example, your birth certificate, or your grandmother dies and she leaves you a house, you want to sell that house or get a birth certificate from the government, you go to the embassy. The embassy says, you must have paid your 2% tax. Not just for this year, from the year you arrived, can be thousands and thousands of pounds.
OK, so why are we seeing violence in the streets around Europe, and how do we see that going forward here, then?
Because of what I've been saying about the tax that's extracted from the community. And the young people who come here say, I didn't flee from my home, cross the Sahara and do this, only to be taxed and forced by the government. And they use all sorts of means. They use even physical violence in European countries to force the exiles to support them. And they hold these rallies where they have young kids dressed in military fatigues marching up and down, you know, shouting for the regime. And the young people who oppose that say, we're not going to put it anymore. We're going to break up these events. And that is where the confrontation happens.
And how bad do you think this could get, then, on the streets of Britain?
Look, I don't want to... You can't predict, and I don't want to overemphasise it, but I think people will be hurt, and there's even a possibility of people being killed.
Gosh.
It's really getting serious. People are throwing, you know, lumps of concrete at each other. Now, you only have to make a mistake and somebody is dead. And I think that is really worrying situation.
And there's not really a lot we can do about it as long as people are here, I suppose, is there, really?
Well, we can't send them back because the situation is so bad. They are here. And the problem is that the government was presented with evidence back in 2011 about this extraction of tax by the Eritrean government through the consul. They did nothing about it. 2 years ago, the House of Lords said, we must have a serious look at this and we've got to have a robust policy.
Yeah.
Nothing is being done. And one government after another has ducked the issue of really taking on the Eritrean government.
And it's going to keep escalating, I suppose, isn't it? Look, can I just say thank you very much?
It's a pleasure.
And, well, unfortunately, because of the subject matter, but I do suspect that we'll be talking again at some point soon. So thank you. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show. That is, of course, Martin Plout there, who's former BBC Africa editor and research fellow at King's College University. Now, up next, the NHS is serving food that you wouldn't give to your dog. Has our National Health Service become a national disgrace? And who is to blame? But don't forget sending your pictures of disgusting NHS meals, or nice ones as well, to be fair. GBviews at gbnews.com. Plus, my press pack returns, so very shortly, in just a couple of moments, you will have all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages. And I'll show you what happened when Michael Bublé love-bombed Prince Harry. It's not great. I'll see you in a sec.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Lots of people very concerned about what's happening in the Middle East. Iran obviously denying it, but the next move from the United States, our key allies, will be absolutely key.
Absolutely right. And I think there's a lot of talk about where this could go, whether the situation could be escalated. But I think the chatter is heading in the right direction, which is about de-escalation. So if there are going to be targeted sanctions against Iran, that's already happened through expelling certain diplomats and other measures there. But you can do that without arm-to-arm combat at this stage. But I think the US will be weighing up all of its options. Antony Blinken obviously gave a press conference in the United States yesterday to say that, you know, there will be a response from the US, but it'll be at their time and it'll be in the way in which they think is the most appropriate. So all eyes are now on the United States as to when it makes that move.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, isn't it, how domestic politics plays so much into international politics. The States, they've got a presidential election this year. We've got a budget coming up. So all the noise, both sides. You've got Donald Trump saying, you know, go a bit more hawkish, I suppose you could say, than President Biden. And here we've got all the generals, we've got the Secretary of State for Defence coming out saying, we need conscription, we need more cash. But a lot of that is, you know, part of the sort of national narratives rather than actually looking at what's happening in Iran, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it plays into, you know, the very uncertain times that we're living. And you're absolutely right. You know, there'll be supporters of Donald Trump who are clearly adversaries of Joe Biden to say we must act now. It's a demonstration of showing your strength. Opponents of Biden will say that the US looks weak if it doesn't take action now against Iran, who are clearly, as we know, funding these at arm's length organisations like Hezbollah in Tehran, like the Houthis who are carrying out the attacks in the Red Sea. So Iran is responsible.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's time to bring you tomorrow's news tonight now in the liveliest paper review you'll get anywhere on telly. Here are the front pages. So we take it away with the Metro. Beautiful souls. Very sad story, this. Tragedy of dead siblings. So 3 young children believed to have been murdered in their home were beautiful souls, a friend said. Unfortunately, they were a baby, aged 3 years old, and another one aged 7 years old as well. Really, really sad story, that. We're going with the eye now. Labour set to pledge triple lock on UK state pensions. Sir Keir Starmer and Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves will commit to continuing existing state pension safeguards. So it looks as though that is it's an interesting pledge, really, from the Labour Party. Labour set to pledge triple lock. Daily Express. PM, I know it's been tough, but our plan will boost Britain. He's really emphasising the plan, isn't he? I've got a plan. Rishi Sunak has vowed to renew Britain's sense of pride after tough times. He promised Daily Express readers, who met him at number 10, that his plans for the economy will boost Britain. Well, there we go. Let's go to the Daily Telegraph. US moves to block Israeli offensive. Biden tries to stop the invasion of Rafah. Also, men and women's brains work differently. Scientists prove. It says, this is the Daily Telegraph, don't start shouting at your TV screens. Apparently, the brains of men and women operate differently, scientists have shown, for the first time in a breakthrough that proves sex does matter in how people think. OK, let's go to the National. Refugees are welcome here. Cleverly's claim that Scotland does not take its fair share of asylum seekers fails to look at the full picture, expert says. With respect to the National, the expert also then went on to say that if you do actually take the definition of asylum seeker, then Scotland is lagging behind. But there we go. But the story at the top of the National is what we're talking about now. Health Board says sorry after picture of disgusting hospital food goes viral. Well, I'm joined by my press pack. I've got Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, journalist and commentator Mike Buckley, and former Brexit Party MEP Belinda DeLucy. So it is bad enough having a relative in hospital, of course it is. But how would you feel if you knew they were given this for lunch? This is what an elderly man was given at Queen Elizabeth NHS Hospital in Glasgow. But wait, this isn't the only dodgy dinner on offer in the NHS. I mean, look at that. So I'm sorry, but let's keep that on the screen for a sec. So top left to me looks like dead mice in hummus. And then you've got, well, I mean, I've thrown that up on the top right. And then at the bottom, that's come out the other end. And then, so are both of them. That, to be honest with you, is the stages of a heavy night, isn't it? It's not exactly putting their health into the National Health Service. I mean, Carol, what's going on here? Has it become a national embarrassment?
I'm just saying that I'm old enough to remember when the National Health made its food on the premises. All of these are farmed out to outside companies who bring it in terrible old trays. I mean, that first one you showed there, I can't identify what that food is on that plate. There's two. I can identify the potato, but then there's something else that looks like a potato and something else that looks like reconstituted meat. The whole point about, you're never more vulnerable than when you're in hospital. You're sick and you need your nutrients then more than ever. There's there's no nutrients in any of that stuff you just showed.
Mike, you're going to tell me this is 14 years of Tory cuts, aren't you?
I mean, it is. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I have to say, just before we went live, Carol was literally there like a minute ago just saying, oh, well, 15 years ago, my mum was getting great food. I'm like, under a Labour government? That's why. When the NHS was decently funded.
No.
If you want decent food, it's going to cost money.
This is
Pay for
tosh.
it.
This is absolute tosh.
I'm literally telling just say what you told me.
This is private companies that are making money, so they're paid a certain amount by the
It doesn't really matter if it's public or private, does it?
Go on, Belinda.
Pay for a decent meal wherever it comes from. The answer to this government is no.
When I saw that picture, Patrick, of the spam and potatoes, I thought it was the gubbins from an actual operation. I thought it was literally something that had been schlepped out. It was so disgusting. I actually think Carol's got a point. The NHS is allowed to waste so many millions of pounds of money. It's never had so much more money than it has now, so it's not about cuts. The problem is it's wasted all the time, mismanaged all the time, so it could be spent on food, but instead it's outsourced
and
to
the NHS
rubbish.
should be ashamed of this. They can't make an excuse of that. They should sack the company that is providing that and employ a company that will provide...
I mean, you wouldn't, to be honest with you, you wouldn't Well, I mean, I literally would feed it to the dog, but I mean, it's the phrase, isn't it? You wouldn't give it to your dog.
You
It's
wouldn't
not
love your
far
dog very much if you gave it that, I can tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's no good for the dog either. It's disgusting.
This isn't a joke. If we're feeding patients poor food in hospital, they're going to stay sick for longer. They're going to stay in hospital beds for longer. That means there's fewer beds available for anybody else. This matters for these people's health. It matters for all of us.
No, Lisa's emailed in. Thank you very much, Lisa. I haven't seen this yet, by the way, so goodness only knows what's about to hit our screens. But she writes, "Hi, Patrick. This is the fish, chips and mushy peas I was served at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Gateshead. Needless to say, I didn't eat it. Can we get... Let's see that again.
It's the mushy peas that I'm messing
No,
with.
for me, it's the mushy peas. They look like you could bounce them off a wall.
Not good.
I'll be honest with you, the breaded fish doesn't look awful. The chips look all right. I think the mushy peas, It looks like it's got a bit of a crust on it. Yeah, but, I mean, Belinda, it is... I mean, just generally, the food in hospitals for me... I mean, I know it's a bit of a national joke, but there's a heck of a lot of things online there. I mean, it's not really fair.
It's not fair, and it is going to keep people sicker for longer. And just to give you a very, very quick example, a friend of mine worked in the NHS for 7 years, and they cleaned the wards, right, make them all nice and clean. They were not allowed to use step ladders to clean the top of lights because of health and safety. So the NHS Trust outsourced it to Rent-A-Kill, a mice and rat company, very, quite expensive compared to use the steps to waste taxpayers' money rather than putting their own...
example of the money that
the money that is wasted that could be put to good food is astronomical. It's actually nothing to do with cuts, just mismanagement.
Yeah, all right. Well, now, big hand to our firemen and women who put their lives on the line every single day for members of the British public. Well done to all of our exceptional emergency service workers, except, of course, when there's 4 feet of floodwater. So that's right, a man trapped in a sinking car, there we go, was left on his own because firefighters are only allowed to go in water waist high, apparently. Thankfully, a braver couple took the plunge and fished the driver out. That's how you do it. I do find that quite staggering, really, that we've got, a firefighters there standing looking at the sea. I don't know if we could just bring that back up, can we, at all? Just bring it back up at all? It's ridiculous that we've got... So, a bit of floodwater. I mean, can I also just say I think it's absolutely ludicrous, and this hasn't got enough attention, which is why a learner driver has ended up in a lake full of floodwater. I mean, I would seriously question if the driving instructor is taking you into that, then that is absolutely staggering. But, yeah, I mean, the fact that our fire service and our emergency service can't go and step in.
And I love the way they're stepping in to lead him into a car now, after the public having risked their lives to get them out. I mean, that is shocking.
I don't think it bodes well, does it? I mean, can you imagine being there surrounded by floodwater, panicking, and you've got a firefighter there going, "It's all right, don't worry, a member of the public will be here in a minute." And anyway, look, coming up, the crowning moment of the show, where I decide tonight's greatest Britain and Union Jackass, and get ready for Michael Bublé, Mickey Bubble to his mate, serenading Prince Harry.
A sage on history's page, make him cough him itch. We call him Harry.
What? Oh, seriously? Come on. Does Harry really want to return to royal duties? We debate if the king should take him back. All of that, and yes, more of tomorrow's front pages for you in just a second. I'll see you in a sec.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yeah.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially, just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for the people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offender behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
All right, it's time to return to the liveliest paper review on telly now. More front pages for you. Let's do it. All right, The Guardian. Stand with me. Yulia Navalnaya vows to continue her husband's fight. Ex-Post Office chair out for revenge, says Kemi Badenoch. Let's go to the Daily Mail. Hundreds of high-risk flights land in UK unchecked. So high-risk aircraft are landing in Britain without security checks in a major new immigration scandal the Mail can reveal. The Borders Watchdog warned of dangerous failings at a prominent London airport, which potentially allow thousands of passengers to evade passport controls. There we go. Yeah, well, The Times. Same story about Navalny's wife, widow, unfortunately now. OK, all right, so I'm joined again by my press pal, Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, journalist commentator Mike Buckley and former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. So, while the King is open to rebuilding ties with his estranged son, insider sources have stressed that the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, will not be welcomed back as a working royal anytime soon. And let's be honest, opening the local community centre isn't exactly Harry's idea of a good time. Just last night, he was hosting a lavish gala dinner in Vancouver alongside wife Meghan Markle. And to wrap up their week promoting the 2025 Winter Invictus Games, the Sussexes just wanted their privacy and hate to be the centre of attention. So here's Mickey Bubble, Michael Bublé, singing on stage about how amazing they both are.
One man, a life-changing plan. Does all he can. He's a visionary, a sage on history's page. Meghan calls him H. We call him Harry.
I've just a sage on history's page.
I think I threw up in my mouth there a little bit. Look, it's the sort of sycophantic, hero-worshipping stuff that Harry and Meghan must absolutely love. I love Michael Bublé, sadly, I'm like, that was just... The thing is, that's the last thing this couple needs, is this kind of messiah complex that Michael Bublé's just given them.
I mean, look, you know, it's one thing being, you know, sympathetic towards Harry and Meghan, all of this stuff, but that is token.
He's a sage.
I mean, I think, let's be honest, the Invictus Games is a good thing.
Yes.
I mean, it's a very good thing. You know, lots of people who've been in conflict situations and are disabled as a result, they get the chance to compete and to do something together, and it's genuinely a good thing, and indeed Harry did start it, so I think that's something to celebrate.
Agreed.
However, I think this kind of, you know, singing from Michael Bublé, it's not very British, is it? I think as British people, it makes us feel slightly awkward, as well as the wider context of how awful he's been towards the rest of the royal family. Yeah. He hasn't apologised. Certainly, if I were Charles, they'd be like, well, mate, you can't have your royal roll back until you've actually said sorry.
Yeah, which is not happening anyway, is it? So, yeah.
Yes, but I think it's interesting, isn't it? All these rumours that he might be going to be taking a bit of work up now. It's tosh. They've come from his camp because the palace officials have said, under no way, under no circumstances, is he going to come back and do this. You know, it strikes me that Harry now realises the enormity of what he's done and what he's lost, and I think he's trying to get back, because what he's asking for now is what he refused to do before. Remember, he asked the Queen for a part-time role. She said, absolutely no, that's going to happen. That's what he's asking for now. He wants to put a foot back in the water.
You're right, actually, Mike, you're making the point about that it being so unfamiliar as Brits, because actually, if it had been a British mate singing it, the whole song would have been ribbing him.
Oh, yeah.
You know, making fun and that self-deprecation, which is absolutely absent there. But
the fact that they're sitting, tittering, loving it, just shows what sycophants they are. They want that.
It is all. I mean, I just think, but also at this point, no, the Invictus Games is a good.
It is amazing.
It's one of the good things that Harry.
And it's clear they love each other. They were very sweet to each other, Harry and Meghan. I will give them that.
I'm not buying.
No, I think that was quite sweet.
How they came out on the slopes on St Valentine's Day on a time they were promoting the new website.
I do think that if you're getting a big kind of semi-royal send-off for things, at what point do you think you'd have to have a word and go, look, can you actually just stop it, seriously?
Well, you would think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I think for us it's just genuinely quite uncomfortable. But anyway, we never have to watch it again on the bright side.
No. Apart from now, no. OK. Now, look, we're over to the world of football now, because, look, you'll have heard of the Premier League. You've heard of La Liga. But now it's time for the Bundesliga. Yes, it's time. It's the team that have a religious habit of winning. They are the best team bar none, aren't they? Yeah, I've got loads of these. It's great. No,
Where
seriously.
is that? Where is that?
It's somewhere in Italy.
We thought we said that. We guessed it was Italy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, fantastic. I mean, you look at that and you think, Jesus Christ, don't you? But then, obviously, you know, they're just not getting there. Anyway, Mick has emailed in with this picture of his dodgy hospital food. He writes, "Hi, Patrick." What is that?
What's it supposed
While I was
to
in
be?
hospital, this is one of the meals they gave me. What a joke. So it's just a jacket potato. It's been punched. Someone's just battered a jacket.
It's been dropped on the floor and trodden on.
Someone's gone, there you go, get better. I like the way he's gone, what a joke. Regards, Mick. Well, there you go. Kind regards to you too, Mick. OK. Oh, Rita from Ireland's emailed in with this picture of her measly hospital dinner. Has she? Yeah. I mean, that does look a little bit like something someone's had amputated, doesn't it, actually? Oh, great.
It's kind of it's a homage to sausage and mash, only it's
an homage. It's a minimalistic, one. Anyway,
Definitely amputated fingers.
Where's the gravy?
Well, I hope it's the fingers. Right, OK, so it's time now. It's time now to reveal today's greatest Britannian Jackass. Any moment now. There we go. Good stuff, guys. All right. Carol, who's your greatest Britain, please?
Right, mine is the woke idiots at the Leeds Playhouse who placed a trigger warning on their production of My Fair Lady in case its depiction...
We're going greatest Britain first. Greatest Britain. It's all right. We've had a sneak peek of Union Jackass. Go back in me, greatest Britain.
I've completely...
That's all right.
I'm very sorry.
I'll tell you who it is. It's James Esses.
It's James Esses. I'm glad you remind me. He exposes a lot of nonsense about gender ideology. He broke the story last week about John Lewis's in-house magazine, Identity, was giving parents advice how to chest bind their children, their trans children. Now, this is after the Johns Hopkins University produced a report that says chest binding in adults creates spinal deformities, creates rib fractures, creates skin conditions and headaches. And still they're advising parents to do this.
Strong start.
John Lewis should sell furniture and washing machines and shut up.
And overly priced kitchens. Anyway, go on.
That as well.
Mike, who's your greatest
So, mine's not a Brit, mine's honorary greatest Britain, which is Yulia Navalny, because of her incredible courage and just the way that she's dealt with, you know, just the awful circumstances that she's been in, the awful killing of her husband, and the grace and wisdom and just bravery that she showed today. I think was just absolutely incredible.
I do wonder if she wishes, she must wish that he'd not gone back. You know, I can imagine that's. Yeah, I imagine that was an incredibly difficult conversation at the time, and probably every single day since, actually. But Belinda, who's your greatest Brit?
My greatest Brit is Prince William for putting on a brave face at the BAFTAs. He's an incredible soft power gift that this country has. And though his wife has been ill, his father has cancer, and this constant drama that Prince Harry's stories are bringing the family all the time, he just keeps on working through, and he was charming everyone and delighting everyone. And he is the, you know, a representative of our country, and he's very stoic and resilient. So he did us proud at the BAFTAs.
Absolutely. Well, every single day I get to this moment in the show, and I don't regret my choice, but I just think maybe I could have... But that's a good thing, because they're also strong candidates. Anyway, today's winner of the Greatest Britain is James Esses. There we go, for pointing out about the John Lewis thing.
Oh, good.
Right, we're going now for... We are going now for Union Jackass. Carol, go on.
For the second time, the woke idiots at the Leeds Playhouse who placed a trigger warning on their production of My Fair Lady because they say it's depictions of high society and classicism could upset members of the audience. I mean, how stupid are these people? These are also the same people who put a trigger warning on The Sound of Music.
Did they, really?
Yes, they did, because of its reference to Nazism. You know, do they know that people actually lived through Nazism and managed to survive it, whereas their audiences can't bear
All
reference?
right, go on, Mike. Union Jackass time.
I'm just thinking maybe we can all agree that theatre doesn't need a trigger warning.
Yes, definitely.
That would be a rarity, wouldn't it? My Jackass, the Home Office, and this is genuinely awful, right?
Okay, cool.
So there was some, people moving to the UK, took an English language test like over a decade ago, and they were given like false results. Basically, they were told that they hadn't passed when they clearly had passed.
Right.
It's been a decade on. There's been no apology. People's lives have been ruined because the Home Office said the Home Office said you've lied and cheated when they hadn't lied and cheated. These people have not been able to get jobs.
I mean, there's enough people that they could decide to...
It's been absolutely awful, and the Home Office is still not apologising.
OK, all right, interesting stuff. Go on, Belinda.
Mine's Keir Starmer. Nobody really knows what he actually thinks about the Gaza-Israel conflict or anything. It feels like he's just blowing in the wind, which makes me feel very unsafe for foreign policy in the future and who is putting pressure on him to do what. And his latest flip-flopping, I just think Keir has to get it this
Well, the winner is Sir Keir Starmer. There we go. That's Union Jackass. Mike, I promise if you keep coming back, eventually you will win one of these. You will
I like
either
your
a greatest
I look forward to that day.
or a Union Jackass. It will happen one day. Can I just say thank you very much, my wonderful panel. I really, really enjoy the Monday nights. We get stuck right into it, and that's exactly the way it should be to kickstart your week. Headliners are up next for a more detailed look at all of tomorrow's papers in the way that only they can. I'll be back tomorrow at 9. I will have a couple of gems lined up for you, so I'll see you then.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good evening to you. I'm Alex Burkill. Here's your latest GB News weather update. There will be a spell of wet and windy weather for many of us tomorrow, but before that, we do have a relatively quiet night ahead. That's because we have high pressure to the south of us, which is keeping our weather largely settled. That being said, a weak front is pushing its way eastwards across Scotland this evening, bringing some thick cloud and some outbreaks of rain for a time. Then through much of the night, for many of us, it is going to be largely dry. Perhaps some thickening cloud in the west will bring a few outbreaks of drizzly rain here, and watch out for some mist and fog patches too. It may be a touch fresher than some recent nights, particularly in the east where we may get some clearer skies, temperatures perhaps dropping to low single figures but staying above freezing. However, as we go through Tuesday, a wet morning across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland as a band of rain pushes its way in. That is then going to slip further south and eastwards into England and Wales as we head into the afternoon, though across the southeast here it's likely to stay dry at least during the daytime, and mild again, highs of around 14 or 15 Celsius. Some showers pushing in behind that front later on Tuesday, but it's on Wednesday where we get the heaviest rain, likely to be pretty persistent and could cause some localised problems, especially in the southwest, where we do have a warning as some travel disruption and some localised flooding is quite likely. That rain does clear through as we go into Thursday, but more unsettled weather to come as we go through the end of the week and into the weekend, with temperatures dropping close to normal for the time of year.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney. Weekdays from 3 p.m.
Or they're trying to make it better, or they're trying to make it slower, a lot slower. Slower enough, in fact, for it to sufficiently allow the boats to start coming in to cause further political damage to Rishi Sunak.
Which it will do if it carries on.
Of course it will. And this is the Labour peers, the Lib Dem peers, and no doubt some of the Conservative wets, banding together, causing political damage to Rishi Sunak. And the longer it goes on, the worse it will be for the Conservative Party.
There's now a deadline on the Rwanda plan. It's got to start working this summer to have any electoral benefit for Rishi Sunak, because of course if the election is in November, by then the costings will slow down. It's got to be up and running by about May or June, and then they'll take it from there.
Cool. And you have a crumb of comfort for us. Rishi Sunak met a Prime Minister.
Well, a crumb of comfort for those who want to stop the boat, certainly, or we'll get towards it. The PM today met Alexander De Croo, who's a Belgian Prime Minister. They've agreed a UK-Belgium law enforcement cooperation agreement. In short, that is a focus on surveillance and information, ultimately, which should help stop the boats. Not many boats make crossings from Belgium, but it's the kind of, they can hopefully use law enforcement. These are the kind of deals which Sir Keir Starmer's talking about. If he becomes Prime Minister, he'll do more of these deals with countries on the continent, and this shows that the Tory PM can do them too.
And there may be intelligence sharing of crime gangs that operate within Belgium. As you say, it's a much, much further distance, much more perilous across the North Sea. Very unlikely that people will be leaving in any great numbers from Belgium. But nevertheless, is this of note, or is it a token victory against the backdrop of domestic loss?
It's interesting they can do it with Belgium and not do it with the European Union, because so far we've been told the returns agreements can't be agreed with individual countries because they've got the European Union to talk to. Maybe this deal can be mirrored with France, and that might help with better cooperation, because basically after Brexit we're a sovereign country. We have to work on some areas more closely with our European neighbours.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You with GB News and the top story this hour. The row between the business secretary and the former PO chairman has deepened tonight. Henry Staunton has accused Kemi Badenoch of making an astonishing series of claims. After today, she told MPs he'd sped made-up anecdotes following his dismissal. Miss Badenoch took aim at Mr Staunton today in the Commons, accusing him of making up claims that he was told to delay government compensation payments for post office staff. And yesterday, Mr Staunton said the government had deliberately delayed compensation payments. And tonight he says he's standing by those comments. Miss Badenoch had earlier said Mr Staunton's claims were a blatant attempt to seek revenge following his own dismissal.
Mr Staunton claimed that when he was first appointed as chair of the Post Office, he was told by a senior civil servant to stall on paying compensation. There is no evidence whatsoever that this is true. In fact, on becoming Post Office chair, Mr Staunton received a letter from the Bay's Permanent Secretary, Sarah Mumby, on the 9th of December 2022. It welcomed him to his role, making it crystal clear that successfully reaching settlements with victims of the Post Office scandal should be one of his highest priorities.
Well, in other news today, a man who piloted a people smuggling boat across the English Channel has been found guilty of manslaughter. Here's the rescue taking place in December 2022, if you're watching on TV. You can see the dinghy has collapsed in on itself. It killed 4 people on board. Ibrahima Ba, who's a Senegalese migrant, was in charge of the vessel, navigating using only mobile phone technology, which the judge said led to the deaths. One of the passengers told Kent police it was common knowledge among those in the boat that once they entered British waters, they would be rescued. New government guidance was issued today for teachers in England on restricting the use of smartphones in schools as concerns grow over the impact of social media on young people. Head teachers can now choose to include a ban on phones with provisions for searches of school bags if necessary. Head teachers say the guidelines aren't needed because robust rules already exist. The government says, though, recent data shows 29% of secondary school pupils reported mobile phones being used during class. And Lord Cameron has been visiting some key battle sites in the Falkland Islands in the South Atlantic today as part of his visit to show islanders there that they are a valued part of the British family. At Goose Green, where 18 British Army personnel lost their lives in '82, Lord Cameron visited the museum and thanked locals for keeping their memory alive. He also laid a wreath at St Carlos, nicknamed Bomb Alley due to the aerial attacks faced by